Hello, everybody. Welcome to my Tuesday night live painting demo. I was running a little bit late tonight, so hopefully no one was waiting too long. And let me get the sound down and working correctly. So tonight I will be painting. Let me get it up here. This young man named Corbin. It was for a commission that I'm working on. It's actually a commission of three paintings. This is the third of three that I'm doing here, and this is for a Christmas commission. So just the paintings hopefully won't be too wet by Christmas. I think they'll actually be dry if I can get this one done in the next couple days. I've been really becoming more conscious of how long it takes a painting to dry, and really the way I've been painting, that takes about 4 to 5 days to dry, as long as your furnace is not out and the house isn't 40 degrees. So I've found that paintings don't dry very quickly when your house is freezing. So with that said, I'm going to jump right in and start the painting process. I need to find my doodling brush, whatever, my sketching brush that I use to put in the initial lay-in. Let's start with, um, let's just start with this one. Doesn't have much of a tip to it, but it has just enough hair to get going on it. So I'm going to start the way I usually do, is just do a little bit of measuring um, do a little bit of measuring with a little bit of paint on the brush. And I'm just going to just eyeball this in to begin with. These For this commission, I've been working on a 8 by 10 size, which is a little bit easier than some of the largest sizes in terms of drawing, because I can get the whole image on the screen, which does help instead of having to work on it in bits and pieces. And hopefully my sound's okay. I think there's looks like there's three people out there watching. Let me know if you hear me okay, and also um, if you do, let me know where you're watching from too. Kind of curious. I see my coworker Angela is here tonight, and Angela has this week off, so um, but she calls in anyway, make sure we were doing okay. She has a staycation, which I'm a little bit envious of. I might take a day or two off just to catch up on my painting work. Okay, so now I can start to make sure that I'm getting my landmarks in the right place by starting some measurement. Just have a few pieces. The chin, bottom of the lip. It actually comes down a little bit lower here. Just going to add a little bit of color so I can see what I'm doing. Grab a paper towel here. And if I can, actually, I want to grab a brush that has a little more hair to it. This one's, I've worn down to a stump, so it's a little hard to get the paint flowing here. Oh, this one's perfect. So if you look at this brush that I have, it barely has any hair left on it. And so I'm going to put that one away. And this one is an old beat up bristle brush, but it has enough hair on it to get something out of that. Ouch, excuse me, bumping and being a little clumsy tonight. to something like that. It's got a really nice smile going there. It's about right. And then I'm going to check it from side to side. That's good. The other corner is a little bit tighter in. Something like that. Just going to get a little bit of some flesh tone going here so that I can knock some of this out. Now this brush isn't quite soft enough for laying in the color like this, but I'm gonna start in anyway. Okay, and then the bottom of his nose is gonna come down right about here. And again, if I can find the edges, if I measure from side to side, that's right. That's pretty close right there. And the eyebrows, let's get another measurement going there for that. Okay, and I've mentioned this on previous demos, is that I work sight size, meaning that the the reference in my vision is the same size as the scale of the painting. So I can look back and forth between the two and see them as being more or less the same. I can quickly shift my vision from side to side and see them. The eyebrows actually have to come down a bit lower here. You can see I actually started them way up here when they're actually right around there, which means his eyes are going to be something more like this. And the forehead, her hairline is right about there. And let's get measurements for the corners of the eyes. Okay, I'm going to get a little bit softer brush going here so I can actually have a little more control going. So here's a nice, fairly large round that hasn't been used yet. I don't know if you can see that. This is a number, that's my eyesight these days. Let me see if we get the glasses on. Okay, this is a number 6 round. No, sorry, number 9. Number 9 round. Okay. And I'm just going to mix up some color in here. Sort of get what's called the halftone, which is the average color of the light side of the face. And if I can mix up a big batch, then I can move this thing along pretty quickly. have something kind of an orangey red color, maybe get a little more yellow in there. And what I have is maybe a little bit too intense, if you can see it. That's pretty intense, so I could add a little bit of purple just to knock it down a little bit. Purple or black, but I think in the purple direction. Oh, that's a little bit too dull. So let's zing it up a little bit again. Okay, yeah, I think that's good. And to get this sense of curvature, I want the center of his face to be a little bit lighter than from side to side. So let's make up a little bit of this pool be slightly lighter so that I can move in that direction. And around his eyes are going to be a little bit darker. I'm just approximating right now. I can go in later and get a little bit more exact with the colors. And then I can go a little bit redder and darker along the sides. That's great. Okay. Okay. Now it's starting to look like something, but just a very soft version of what it is I'm painting. I can come in, sort of approach it slowly, and come in and put more details and accents, and then it will start to it will start to kind of appear, come forward a little bit. Let's see, I want the shadow underneath the nose to be fairly red. Has quite a bit of red in it, and I'm using alizarin permanent to get kind of that reddish, darkest reddish color. That's one of my favorite colors for getting areas like inside the nostrils or the darker areas in lips, is to use that color, alizarin permanent. And that's a gambling color. It's a substitute for a more traditional color, which is um, alizarin crimson. But alizarin crimson is a fugitive color, meaning that it's not light fast and the color will fades over time. So they've come up with a synthetic formulation of that same color. It's a pretty good match. Um, I used to miss the colors that I would get with alizarin crimson a little bit, but now not so much anymore because I have quinacridone red that I can just add a little bit into the alizarin permanent to punch it up a little bit. Okay, and I have some lighter pinker color I can get for getting some of the lighter areas in his cheeks. I'm I may have to put out just a little bit more paint than I have. I have some very small spots of paint on my palette, and what you don't want to do is get in a situation where you're starved of certain colors, and then you end up trying to work around that color, but it ends up affecting your ability to paint in the end. Especially if you're not getting enough paint on the brush when you're putting down certain brush strokes. And then if the paint gets too thin in spots, then you're really not painting effectively. Okay, right now I made him look like an old man now with the hair looking kind of white. So let's see if I can fix that quickly. I want to make sure that I get the shape of his head right because that will really affect the overall likeness and sense of volume of the head. Okay, there's a few things that aren't quite right there, but I can adjust them pretty quickly. It's not too hard to do that. Need this forehead coming out a little bit further. And I think I'm going to change brushes. I really feel like I want to be using a flat at this point. And get my glasses on again to tell you what size it is. This is a number 10. Um, can't tell if it's a flat or a bright. Brights are a little bit shorter. This one's somewhere in between, so don't know which one to call it. But let's just say that it's a flat. They're both the same shape. Typically, flat will have longer hairs. And these kind of brushes are good for getting kind of a sculptural look if you're painting the planes in the face, for example, and you're delineating each plane. You can kind of get that squarish brushstroke that looks almost like you're like chiseling like a sculpture, which will have sort of that same kind of shape to it. It's also a useful brush because you can turn the brush an angle and get thinner marks, or you can use the very corner of the brush and get just like a point or kind of a very small amount of detail. Sorry, I keep on bumping the camera here because I do have it kind of really close to where I'm working. So if you get a little vertigo from that, I am sorry. And you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw down some of the highlight in his forehead right in here. And that's going to give me a sense of some of the lightest light so I can see what I'm working towards. And I'm also going to go a bit thicker because um, that's the way I like to paint highlights is to build up and get kind of some brush strokes that sit right on the surface. And that kind of gives it the similar quality as or look as a highlight. That's an old master's trick. I didn't invent that one. Something that John Singer Sargent does, and well, a lot of masters do that, where the highlight itself can be just a stroke that sits on top, even in an alla prima painting where um, the painter will come in with a softer brush and a thicker stroke, so it just sits on top of the rest of the paint. Okay, great. Okay, I am running low on orange, so that's something I just may grab out of the bag here quickly. So I use permanent orange. I tend to use these 150 milliliter tubes. I go through a couple tubes a year of each color. Um, so these are you can buy a larger amount. This is again Gamblin artist color paint, and they also sell it in 16-ounce or 8-ounce. I guess it's 8-ounce cans. This is 150 milliliters is the equivalent of I forget how many ounces. It doesn't say on here, but if you're doing a lot of paintings like larger murals or larger canvases, then you do probably want to buy the cans, and they do come in smaller tubes, which are 37 milliliters. That's a little more economical, but if you're doing a lot of painting, it's better to buy the larger amounts of paint, and you'll save some money in the long run. For those of you who are just starting out, though, buying a full set of the larger tubes can be a bit expensive. So, for those people, I recommend using the student grade colors. In Gamblin, that would be the 1980 colors, which have some fillers in the color to make them a little bit cheaper, or to start off with a limited palette so that you're working with fewer colors to begin with, and then start adding colors as you your skills increase, and that you're just spending a little bit more money over time. Okay, and at some point I'm going to give him those appley kind of cheeks that he has here to really emphasize that big smile that he has. Okay, we got a really quiet group tonight, which is okay. I can keep on talking as I paint. If you have any questions, though, let me know. Happy to answer any questions that you might have. Okay, so I'm going to confess right now the reason why I started late tonight is I was getting all set up, and I was just relaxing, and I closed my eyes for a minute and I looked up. I woke up and I looked up and it was 9:15. So now you know I fell asleep, and but that's okay. That means I must be pretty relaxed then if I getting ready for one of these live painting demos and I'm relaxed enough to fall asleep first. Don't. I used to have a little bit of stage fright going into these things, but I've done maybe 40 or so of them. I haven't actually kept track. Um, Let me see. So, Eric has a question. Did you ever struggle with being impatient in your art career? I struggle with it. I know if I just take my time, the end result will be better. So I'm not sure if the question means impatient with your art career or impatient with the painting itself that you're working on. Um, but I can answer for both. Um, and actually, I did a video about being a little bit impatient with the drawing um, part of it. If you look for my video that's called Painting Babies' Faces, ADHD, and Impressionism, and it's the ADHD part that I referred to a little bit in this video, which is that I'll start. I had this idea that you really needed to start a painting with a tight drawing before you really get into the paint, and I found that that didn't really fit my process that well. I would get too impatient, and so I found if I use this alla prima technique, which lends itself to drawing with the paint, that you can skip the whole drawing part altogether and start painting really an approximation of what the painting is going to look like, and slowly work towards a finish that way, as opposed to spending a lot of time in the drawing. And so for me, that fit my process better. It fit my sense of attention. And so in that respect, once I started painting that way, then I didn't feel so patient, because I knew that um, the quicker that you can get to that sense of how it was going to look like when you're finished, the quicker that you could start to see it, and then at that point you could start to get a little more exact. And so this, and a lot of painters paint that this way now. I don't think it used to be quite so popular, but now if you look on YouTube and you look at the technique, that a lot of painters are just sketching with the paint now and then going straight in to the painting from there. So I hope that answers your question, Eric. By the way, Eric, where are you watching from tonight? I'm curious. Here's just gonna keep. I'm gonna really start to think about the sense of form of this eye. So you can see how it's darker on the sides and then it's lighter in the middle. It's a little bit too much white there, but that helps give it a sense of form. And you notice I'm not really painting the details in the eye yet. I'm just really trying to give it the the right shape and placement, and then I can slowly add a little bit of detail, maybe where the white of the eye is going to be. And when I say white of the eye, it's really going to be a grayish blue to be the right value. Okay, so Eric's watching from Ontario. That's nice. Okay. So you can see I just put in a little bit of a blue gray there, and it's already starting to read as the whites of his eyes. And then I can start to see if the eyes are actually feel like they're looking in the right direction, and measure a little bit and start to adjust it so that I have the eyes looking towards us. And in fact, sometimes I like to just go in and throw in the dot of the highlight. Let me find a detail brush to do that first. Um, I've been trying to what is the word? Restructure how I use brushes. I used to leave them sitting in the solvent, and they would get all curled up on me. And now each time, yep, and I have one sitting in the solvent right now. What I try to do is wipe it down each time I'm done using it and lay it flat and not sitting on its tip so that they don't curl on me. Okay, here's the brush I was looking for. It's just a little detail brush. This one actually has a little bit of wear to it, but it's not too bad, and it'll allow me just to put in a dot of white where I want to. So I'm just going to throw down just a little spot there, And I'm going to throw one in there, even though I haven't gotten very dark yet with that part of the eye. So I can just get the sense of glassiness and start to feel a little bit of the direction of the eye. Then I'm going to put that detail brush down because um, another bad habit is trying to paint um, larger areas with too small a brush. And if I held on to that detail brush, it's very comforting. You don't feel like you can mess up if you got this tiny little brush to slowly um, work um, work the color and details. But the painting won't look as fresh if you do all of it with a tiny little brush. It will just look a little bit forced. So it's good to hang on to the largest brush you can manage to do the painting with, or even go with a brush that's too large and just allow that looseness to give an all over loose feeling to the painting. Okay, went a little bit too wide with this light area. I do want to get the hollow of the cheek here, which is right about there. If I look this of these measurements here, that has a little bit of red orange color to it. It's a little bit darker than I painted it. Something like that. Yep, that's good. And then I have a lighter pinker area just underneath it, not too light. And then I have the cheek against the shirt there. With a little bit, again, a little bit more shadow. Actually a little bit tighter than I drew it. And then I have the white of the shirt coming in right around there. So that shirt is going to have a little blue in it to feel as bright as it does. I'm not going to manage to keep it as the pure white of the panel. And so by just adding a little bit of blue, I'm going to start off with a touch of the phthalo blue. It's a little bit dry on my palette, but I can get a little bit of it out. So that's the blue there. And so then it starts to feel white again. And then I get a little bit of the inside of the shirt here. That's going to be a dark gray. And then I have a bit of the background on this side. And the background, if I make it dark enough, will help give the feeling of the white of the shirt. Let's look at this chin measurement again. So I can, if I see something that's off, then I'll remeasure it and repaint it. And the process of doing that, I can make all those little subtle adjustments that bring the proportion and the likeness back in under control. So remember where I started, it's just a very loose sort of drawing, so I am going to need to make adjustments to make it look right in the end. Okay, the shadow side of the shirt is going very green, at least in my photo, which I don't mind. It kind of gives an interesting color there. To make that work, though, I'm going to have to go much darker in the background here. And there's also that similar color green in the background. It's a nice little play of the green in the shadows of the shirt and the green in the background. Okay, so let's see, going to pull this corner of this eye up a little bit higher. And his eyebrow goes out even further here. Okay, now I'm squinting. I'm looking back and forth between the photo and the painting so I can see where things are off. I have a little bit of green on my brush still. I can use it right here along the side of the head where it's picking up some reflected color. I'm going to try to keep those brush strokes really clean clean geometric shapes to make it feel overall just a little bit cleaner, shinier. Sort of the opposite of that kind of muddiness is to have really clear, clean geometric shapes. Clean that up a little bit here by going a little bit lighter. Then around the top of the nose, have a little bit of red coming in. This is where it starts pointing down a little bit. Not really a technical anatomy term, just the top of the nose. It's sort of more the bridge of the nose. And where the nose is a little bit bonier and the flesh a little bit smoother, it's going to reflect the light a little bit more. So like a softer surface is not going to be have quite as hard a highlight, and something that's sort of a small, hard, shiny surface will, like the tip of the nose, will have a much stronger highlight. You can start to see the sense of form there as I put that highlight in. And I get a little bit of red on the underside of the nose here. That's going to give the sense of form when I start to get that little bit of a darker color in. Okay, a little bit too high up, but and let's adjust that highlight so I'm getting it in the right spot. Okay, so that's an example where the paint is sitting right up on the surface of the painting. So it does feel like a reflection or more like a highlight. And I'm going to go back to a smaller brush so I can be a little more exact of where the iris of the eye is and the shape of the eye. So this is a much smaller flat I have. It's a number 1, I think that is. And I'm just loading up the brush with black. I'm going to ignore that dot of white that I had put there just to get the sense of reflection so that I can just paint it in the eye the way I see it, and then go back and I can put that reflection back in after. That's pretty good looking. I want to look at where these relationships are. There's the side of the nose and then the corner of the eye are on the same vertical line. And I want to come in with a little bit lighter blue gray for the white of the eye. Just a couple steps lighter there. And then there's a darker spot here just so I can see where the iris is on the other side. And then there's just a faint line, reddish black, for the bottom edge or the top edge of the bottom eyelid. You have to make it a little bit thinner than that. This brush wasn't quite that thin, but by carving back with another stroke, I can get as long as I'm getting the right color there, I can get a fairly thin line. Yeah, and then I need this sort of lighter pink here that I'm getting. Has a little bit of orange in it, but it's fairly light on that's sort of catching the light just below the eyelid there. Okay, so let's carve here too a little bit the bottom of the nose just above the nostril. His nostrils fairly thin just at the bottom of his nose, both nostrils, and then they're blending with the shadow at the bottom of the nose. But I have to be fairly conscious of where, even though they're blending together, where the nostril begins and the shadow in his nose ends, if I'm really going to get the nose and the shape pointing all in the right direction. He has a little bit more height in his upper eyelid right here on this side. I'm going to add a little bit more white there. And there's a line where the fold of the eyelid is. I really do need a smaller detail brush to get that line. So I have a few detail brushes that are laying around here that are in pretty good shape. So let's see if this one works. It's not the smallest detail brush, but and I say detail brush, these are just small rounds. They're just ones or zeros or sometimes double zeros. And again, if it's not quite thin enough, I can carve a little bit to get the right thickness of that detail. Okay, and I threw some light here, but um, I wasn't exact enough really to get it. It's just a little bit sloppy there, so I can just clean it up a little bit. And again, I want to be conscious of the shapes, and I want to come in with clear, clean brush marks to make it, to keep it fairly clean. I know I'm just saying clean over and over again, but to make the keep the paint from looking kind of sloppily applied. Really want a little bit more crispness to it. Okay, and I tend to under paint yellows in my painting. I'm a little bit conservative with the yellow, and I have to be a little bit better about that because when you stand back from the painting at the end of the day and you've underpainted the yellows, everything tends to look way too pink and red. And the yellows help give a little bit of a balance to that. Also, I want to be aware of the shapes here. Like you can see, there's this between the light and the dark, you can see this curvature. And this is following the curve of his forehead. And it's really pretty close to the center line. And so I want my brush strokes to follow that line. And that's going to help um, improve that sense of volume in the forehead. And open up that area of light a little bit, and then I'll come back in and put the reflected lights in on top of that, something like that. Okay. So I went a little bit too dark here, so I'm going to come back over with a slightly redder and lighter brush stroke, covering over part of it, then it does get that dark off to the side. So I'm just adjusting some of these colors as I go. Needs to be lighter here, it's catching some light, and a little bit more orange and yellow. Has a little bit of lighter yellow right in here. and then it goes a little redder as it moves towards that shadow side. Okay, and so I'm going to clean up that other eye now with this detail brush. Get it, get him looking in the right direction, and get the his iris looking like it's in the right place. And again, I'm just going to ignore that little bit of white that I threw down earlier because it's not in the right spot. Okay, and then I'm going to get that little bit of blue. And then I'm going to carve back a little bit with the dark line that's the upper part of the lower lid. That's not too bad. I'm going to have to do a little more adjusting there, but I think that's a lot closer. Sort of gets me close to where I want to be right now, and I'm just going to throw in a new highlight right there in the eye. I really like it if I can get the eyes detail being just a little bit soft and have that highlight be really sharp. That creates kind of a neat effect. But I can't always get that. Well, I can if I spend enough time doing it and redoing it until it comes out just that way. But don't really have the patience tonight. I'm just going to put it down and hopefully it works. Okay, and need to be a little bit lighter on the top of the nose here without want to not. I kind of feel like that highlight, I like the way it's looking, so I'm going to try to avoid that a little bit. Leave a little bit of dark near it. And want to indicate a little bit of where the fill trim is. It's lighter. His upper lip is lighter here. And then on the other side of the fill trim, he has another hit of light. And then it goes a little bit darker and redder on the far part of his lip. And then a little bit, it's sort of part of the smile here, is his upper lip is turned into the mouth, kind of curving into the mouth there, if I can think of it that way. And so I'm going to curl his lip up a little bit higher, get a little bit, even a little bit of black in there to make it dark enough. Okay. And I need to go a little bit lighter. Oops, got some black on the brush. I didn't want that. And I did exactly what I didn't want to do is I left my brush sitting in the solvent with the tip down, and now it's getting a little bit curled. And this is going to be a long process breaking this habit, I see. And one negative side effect of laying the brushes on their side on the desk next to you is then they just roll right off. So got a lot going on here tonight. Brushes falling off, brushes left in solvent, and just all kinds of craziness. Okay, just going to get some of the lighter lights that are catching the light on the lower eyelid there. There's quite a bit of pink in there, so I can clean up the color just by adding some fresh red and white to the palette and mixing it up with a brush. A lot of people say their colors get so muddy, and I think a lot of times it's a failure of being able to get some of pure color back on the palette and being very methodical about keeping that color clean and then putting it down exactly where you want in the painting. And sometimes muddiness is just the lack of detail and accents in the painting, and the lack of segregating some of the brighter colors. I say segregating is making sure that they're not getting mixed all together, all the different areas of color that you're carefully putting them down where they need to go. Okay, got a little bit of almost greenish white or bluish white in the background there, so I can come in and start to carve into the shape that I have there to make some adjustments. And the ear is a little bit of a like brownish red color. I have it more like a black. That's pretty close there. And then I want his eyelashes to come out a little bit further here. And the eyelashes in the fold of the eye. So I'm kind of have something that's a little off on this side of the face. Maybe I just have given him too much cheek. So let's see if I can pull everything in a little bit tighter. And I'm a little starved of white right now, so I'm going to have to pull some out. This is what I was saying. It's kind of, um, you don't have enough color on enough paint on the palette to do what you need to do, then it ends up making it more difficult to paint. Okay, so I'm pulling out my white. I've been playing around with two different whites. One's titanium white, which is a very traditional white. It's nice and opaque and it's kind of buttery. And when I'm mixing flesh tones, I use a lot of white. It takes a lot of white and just a little bit of some other colors with high tinting strength to get some of those flesh tones. So it's easy to go through 3 or 4 times as much white as any other color. And the other color I've been playing with is brilliant white. Is it brilliant or radiant white? I'm trying to remember. But anyway, it has the same. Now I gotta dig it out so I can remember. So that's one. Where's that other white? Just give me a second. Here it is. It's no, that's titanium white too. Titanium white, titanium white. I think every time I buy paints, I just buy another tube of white, and then sometimes I forget that I already have a tube open. There's another titanium white. I've got 3 tubes here. A little crazy. And eventually I'm going to find that other white, which is, if my memory serves me correctly, it's going to be brilliant white. Okay. It is radiant white. See, I'm wrong. It's radiant white. And so what the difference between titanium white and radiant white is the binder in the paint is different. The titanium white uses linseed oil, and the radiant white uses safflower oil, which is a little bit less yellow, has a clear um, color to it, so it doesn't warm up the color quite as much. And so overall, the radiant white looks brighter and bluer. And if you're mixing cooler colors, holds on to the color a little bit better than titanium white. And so I've been playing around with both, but I don't see a huge difference between the two, especially how I paint, where I'm mixing so many colors together. And let's see if I can get a little more dimension in his cheek here. In the photo, there's not a whole lot of detail there, so it's hard to see the form. But if I'm really careful, I can add a little bit color back in where I'm not seeing color, and I can get that form to turn a little bit better. Okay, and I need to go a little bit lighter here on that um, the side of his mouth. That's it's sort of kind of getting squeezed a little bit with his smile. It's sort of along his jawline. There's this little bit of fleshy form here that's helping to accentuate his smile. Well, that's a hard word to say tonight. Accentuate. Okay. And I need to get a little more paint on my paint's stiffening up a little bit. A little more paint on the brush because it's starting to dry up a little and getting tighter and not flowing quite as nicely. Okay. Let's pull the top of his lip down a little bit tighter because I have his upper his upper lip just a little bit too thick there. And you can see actually it's his tongue sticking out a little bit right there or curled under, and then you get his teeth sticking out the bottom here. And I'm going to start off by going a little bit blue-gray at first, but they have a bit of pink or red. Maybe that's just the photo itself, just the color shifting a little bit. And see if I can get the right color for his lower lip. It's sort of this iridescent reddish orange, kind of like has a little bit of gray in it. That kind of gives it that little bit of a metallic look. And then if I throw some reddish highlight in there, that's going to help give it some form. Okay, got to go a little bit lighter still. And then I can just throw in just a little bit pure white. Okay, and now I knocked out some of the darkest dark of the upper lip there. And where it's casting a shadow in his mouth, that's almost black there. Okay, and his upper lip's still a little bit too thick, but I need to make the top part of his lips here a little bit longer so that I can make that a little bit thinner there. Oops, that's a little bit of the wrong color. That's not too hard to clean up. And I can cut into the top here. To go a bit lighter again. It's important, if you're trying to paint an area and you have the wrong color on the brush, then sometimes you just have to stop before you just put down, you just keep on painting in that area and stop and get the right color. I think that's a lot of artists will just go, well, I have the brush here and I'm just going to keep on painting. Well, it's kind of counterproductive to keep on putting down the wrong color in an area if you really need a different color. So, I mean, when you're first starting and painting and you're blocking in whole areas, that's okay. It's not going to hurt you that much. But as you're refining, if you're really putting down the wrong color, then you're only going to have to come back later and fix that. So it's better just to stop, be a little more patient, get the right color on the brush. See right there, I was too dark with the color, so take the time, remix some color. That's going to be too gray, so you need to clean the brush. I want to get some pure naphtha red. That's actually too much. And then it's going to be mostly white with just a touch of naphtha red. You really can't see this on the camera, but I have much more paint actually down than I actually need. Nope, I need to go a little bit darker and pinker so I'm able to see the color in that tint. There we go. That's the color that I need. And then as I move away from that, I can start to go a little bit darker. And more orange. So something like that. And because I took the time to paint the right color there, then I'm starting to get the effect that I want, which is it looks like the form is turning. And I want to try to get the subtleties of color around it. There we go. And so here I'm also missing some of the yellow that I'm a little bit too timid about. I need to get some of that yellow color down, come in darker. Oh, got a little bit of black in there. I don't know quite where it came from, but to clean that up. Okay, and so once I get some of those subtle color changes, then I can start to see the form turning. Same here. I get those subtle color changes, then it's that form starts turning in a very convincing way. I used to think that you had to have very strong value changes to be able to see the form turning, and what I realized over time is sometimes it's those little very subtle changes of value that really fool the brain into thinking that the form is changing direction, not the strong changes in value from light to shadow, but just little tiny steps. Here's an area where I need to get a little more yellow in right here. This needs to go a little bit lighter. That's looking pretty good. And I did give him some pretty big set of ears there, so gotta carve those back a little bit. And here I'm going to come in with quite a bit of white, which is going to be close to the color that I'm looking for in the background, to carve into the ears a little bit. So something like that. Okay, and I just went a little bit too light there. I need to maintain that sense of shadow on the cheek there. There's just a touch of actually green in that color. Okay, that's looking good. And then, of course, where this cheek lays on top of the shirt, you're going to get a little bit of a darker area, which is the shadow side of the face there. And then right along the very edge, you're going to get the light reflecting back in to that shadow from the shirt itself. So I'm going to get a little bit of that bluish white, maybe just a little bit of green in there, and put that right along the edge. But it has to be much darker than the actual white of the shirt here for it to be able to read. And I gotta get the bottom of the ear a little bit higher here. open up this area too a little bit. Now I got all this pink mixed. I can get something a little bit pinker here. Okay. Now it's starting to look like something, just little by little with the patience that Eric was asking about. If you just putting in the right color and value in the right place, one one brushstroke against the other, then eventually it starts to pull together. You do have to have a little bit of patience, though, to trust that if you work a little bit methodically, that you're going to get there. Okay, went a little bit too blue with that light there, so if I can make it a little pinker, is kind of where I want it to go. Okay, and again a little bit of yellow and orange in that color. And the same with the top of the ear here. There's a light or white, but has quite a bit of yellow in it. And let's just squeeze a little bit of white on top there. Okay, so I do want the top part of this cheek here. It's moving away from the light just a little bit. So I just want a little bit darker value there so that I can feel the top part of that cheek. There we go. And again, see here the light of the upper part of his cheek as it moves towards the temple. It sort of curves around there. So you can see it. It's a plane that is facing towards us. I made it a little bit too pink there. I can add a little bit of yellow. But, if I can think about it very structurally, then it helps me paint it in a way that you can see the form a lot easier. I want to get the hairline, which is very red at that point. It must be where the hair is maybe a little bit thinner and you're seeing some of the flesh through the hair. Got to get lighter so that we get that a little bit sense of translucency there. Okay, so this is carve that shape a little bit to get the right shape. And then I'm going to start thinking about what I want to do with the background. I can start to put in some of the decorative patterns that are in the furniture behind him. Looks like there must be like a couch or a backdrop or something. Or I can just make it a little bit more abstract and go almost like just kind of keep it pure color that sort of gradates a little bit. And I think that is the direction I want to go in with this. I don't want to get too fancy with the background. I do want to make it a little bit of differentiation between the white of his shirt and the lighter area of the background So I think I'm just going to go a little bit, let me see, on that side, maybe a little more towards purple. And then on this side, more green, kind of what's there already. And I have dioxazine purple. It's this very, very strong color. Oh, that is a nice color though. Pull it in right there above the shirt. Can kind of force it down and create this sort of structural shape of the that he has in his shirt right there. Then I'm going to put in a little stronger green on the other side just to kind of get me going here. Stronger green. There we go. And then I'll have that, pretty much what the photo was doing is that it gradates up lighter as it gets to the top. So I can start thinking about that going a little bit lighter here. Okay. So, and there's just a little bit of some blacks, darks, right up against his cheek here. And then the shape of his shirt. And I have to give him a little bit deeper chin than I've given him. And part of the problem is I'm not getting really the underside of the chin yet. So it's not making it look like it's quite right. And there's a little bit of orange and reds in that shadow there. Okay, and I made his cheekbone just a little bit too high, so I'm going to go in and adjust that. Okay, and then I'm going to pull the corner of his mouth out a little bit further to the side here. That's good. Okay, so just looks like I just need just a few, not very big adjustments, but little adjustments to get the right shapes going, right forms around his smile, for example. I don't quite have his nostrils and the shadows quite low enough. They're more or less in a line here, and I have a little bit too much up and down, for lack of a better term. A little bit too much variation of the slopes or the changes of direction there. Let's see, I need to get a little bit of darker red here. That's good. Okay, not getting quite the red that I want on the lower part of the nose. There we go. That's the color I'm looking for. Yep. Now that's a little exaggerated, but I know I can soften that up a little bit. need to clean this up a little bit here on the side of his nose. Let's just have this come up a little bit. I'm not really seeing it that clearly in the photo, but it does kind of cut a little bit in that direction. And the same on this other side. And I'm getting a little bit of orange and yellows here in the side of the nose. Okay, I lost some of the shadow there. I gotta put it back in. So there's some pink there, and I have to be careful the values are structured right, because that's really what helps turn this nose around in space, but it's also at the same time pointing away from the light a little bit. So I have to be aware of all those little turns in direction for it to read correctly. I'm going to come in and put a little more highlight back in. And then I have to pull this eyebrow back over a little. Stopped a little bit short. So his eyebrows are kind of a reddish black, and they need to be just a bit bushier than what I have them. Okay. Sort of hunting around the palette for the colors that I want. Sometimes you just have to stop and mix to get it. Okay, and I need an area of sort of orangey red and a little bit lighter than what I have there. So just coming in, and there's some light hitting the side of his forehead here. That's kind of giving it some orange color. And then there's some pretty strong reds along his hairline here. I don't know if that's has something to do with the compression of the photo. And I see here I've gone a little bit too red on the side of the face and maybe a little bit too dark. So I can come in with a little bit of greens and orange here. That's too green. Yep, that looks right. And then try to get a little subtler red here. And lighten this up just a tad. Okay. And just where the hairline comes down along the ear, sort of turning away from us, and we get a little bit of a darker shadow there. That's going to help give it a little bit more depth, and the sense that the form is turning away from us even more. Then we have even a darker shadow. Now this is the real shadow of the face, is right here. The light is pretty much straight on. So there's just a little bit of shadow along the edges, and this is it right here. That's about the only shadow we get, just on the sides of the face there, and a little bit in the fold of that of the neck, right near the inside of the shirt. Okay, and I've cut his chin a little bit short here, and I think that's part of where it's not quite feeling right yet. So that I need to make his chin, his jaw a little bit longer, and bring the side of the cheek out just a little bit further. Okay. Okay, 1040. I think the sound is still working, the picture's still working, my phone hasn't run out of charge yet, so far I'm pretty happy with any technical issues that we might have um, had, like ones in the past. Okay, and I get a little bit of highlight there on the top edge of the chin. So what's happening here is because he's smiling so big and the lip is pulled down, then there's a little bit of compression here, the lower lip against his chin. That's turning space away from us and not really seeing an accent there in that compression, but it's there. I'm just going to accentuate that just a little bit. And then come in with the light right up against that. And then I'm going to accentuate his smile a little bit more than I have it by getting enough of the darks in there. That's good. Pull that around. Okay, so I'm able to go a little bit lighter with the paint just by removing areas of paint, but don't want to do that too much. It sort of draws out and thins out the paint, and at some point it just doesn't have a good look to it. So as much as I can continue to add paint to the panel, the better off I'll be. Okay, and there's kind of going yellower and lighter here, right in the corner of his mouth. This goes lighter. Okay, so I'm just looking back and forth, comparing what I have painted to what is in the reference, and then making adjustments as I need them. So his cheek comes down a little bit lower here. Same with the other side. I can't forget the highlight on top is right about here. Okay, that's a little exaggerated, but it's not too bad. Pull that back a little bit. The same on the other side, but I'm going to add a little bit of yellow to it. Okay, making further adjustments to his nose. Then I lost that little bit of shadow that's here on that far side. And then it kind of goes to reddish color. Oh, I lost that shadow again. It's a little elusive. That's pretty good right there. And then I have another accent here that's along the side of the eye. Now I went a little bit too dark there, so I can soften that up a little bit. There's little spots here where my panel seems to be a little bit too smooth, and even though I have a very soft brush, if I don't have enough paint on the brush, it just pulls all of the paint right off the panel. Okay. All right, so I need to do a little bit of work refining the silhouette of his head. That really is going to give some characteristics to his hair and how quickly the top of his head is moving away from us. Because you don't really see it in the photo, but even though this is one solid kind of mass, there is a front to his hair and sides. I can just paint it all just solid, and your brain will pretty much fill in the gaps. But I do want to maintain a little bit of the information that's there in the photo. Okay, we're pretty good here. And I'm just going to finish in the background, and I think this is pretty close to being done. I'm going to change, don't like where the highlight is in his eye, so I'm going to move that. Scrub it out. Just move it over just a little bit. There, that's good. And then I'm going to go over the other one a little bit with a little bit stronger hit so it really sits on top. That's looking really good. Okay, so overall, I think I've pretty much gotten this with maybe just a few adjustments. Kind of happy with it. Um, Children's faces can be very difficult to paint just because um, all that sort of roundness that you can kind of get with it. But this one came together pretty well. Still not quite there yet, but pretty close. So I want to get the turn of his collar and the suspenders in. Something like that. And then the line of his suspenders, which has a really nice star pattern on it. I don't know if I'm going to paint that in or not. Something like this. And gets a little bit thicker in the back here. So let's go ahead. I'm going to just paint that in kind of strokes, trying to keep in mind that star pattern that's there. And I can go back in and refine the stars later if I have to. Trying to clean this up a little bit. And if it's interesting, if I can get some thicker paint along the side of his head here, I think that will create some interest. But I do have to clean up that edge. It's not, sometimes I like that kind of ambiguous soft edge, but at this part of the painting, it's not looking right. Because it's making some strange things going on with his forehead there. So I want to re-establish that green that's there, and then the black of the hair that's right alongside of it. That's better. And then I'm going to pull that hair in a little bit with white. And there, I might be able to have a little bit going on with hard and soft edge. So I'm going to repaint the tip of his ear, which is sort of that purpley reddish gray there, kind of mauve-y color. But rounder. Having a lot of trouble with that little confluence of hair, forehead, and background there, but It's not so bad. Okay, that's looking a lot better. Let's give him a little more ear. Okay, I carved into the black from that side, but then I can come back with more black and give him some of the contour that it needs there. Just have his hair coming back a little bit further here so he has enough room for his brains there. Okay, great. That's looking pretty good all around. Um, so I can come back in and really refine some of these shapes, um, but I kind of like the looseness that it has right now. So I think I'm going to be very selective about where I do that so that I don't lose that overall spontaneity feeling that the painting has right now. It's easy to take something like this and overwork it, and then you lose some of the charm that the painting has. Let's get a little bit of green, yellowish green right there in this area. Looks like his nose is a little broken here, so I do want to fix that. Anything that just looks wrong, I want to make sure that it reads correctly. That's a little bit better. And then pull in this side just a little bit. There's this beautiful red in here that I want to get. And the same over here. A little bit of the red that got that curving brow form here on the side, which just has a pretty big hit of red color. With a little bit of orange in it, of course. And I have to go dark enough because remember I have that light moving up the top of the cheek there, and I'm beginning to lose that. So have to have the a little bit of the dark surrounding it. And let's repaint that highlight there. Wasn't really liking that so much. Remember, I had painted that dark on the top of his cheek, and I kind of lost that, so I'm going to go in and restate it right there. Then it comes down the side there. Okay. Then I just want to pull his side of his nostril down just a little bit lower. Just some kind of refinement that it needs just to really get the likeness. It's a little redder, but I want to maintain the dark value. The same on the other side. Just missing a little bit of accent there that's in the crease of his nostril. Okay, I think we're pretty close. Like I said, I don't want to overwork this, but I do want to make the necessary adjustments. Okay, looking really good. Um, okay, see, Randy's here saying, "Hi again, AJ. Randy from Arlington, Washington. Oh man, I'm late. Sorry. Oh, no big deal. Way cute kid. You've nailed him. Yep. I think I think I'm pretty close there. See if it needed that darker dark there. Probably not, but now I got to paint it out. So with that, I think I'm going to go just 5 more minutes, just clean up a little bit, and just encourage you guys, if the 6 of you watching, if you're not subscribed to my channel, I highly encourage you to. Doesn't hurt you. Um, well, maybe you'll get, if you subscribe and you hit the notification bell, um, you'll get that occasional once a week notice that I'm going live. Occasionally I'll put up a video, a short video that's a little more produced, and it would notify you then too. Oh, I did want to put the button in his shirt. Let me see. I have a kind of too big a brush to do this, but maybe just to get an indication of it. Yeah, that's not too bad. let's go a little bit thicker on the collar. Feeling like his the front of his neck is just out a little bit too far, so I'm going to cut in a little bit so he doesn't feel like his chin is pulled down quite so hard. So it's having a little bit to do with the gesture there. Just giving him a little bit longer neck. That's better. I lost the button though. Let's see if I can fix that. Okay, what was that color of that button? It's sort of a greeny brown. A little bit of a white here. Okay, that's pretty good. Okay, and I'm just got the perfect brush here. It has a little bit of an edge that I can sign it by scratching, which I like doing a lot better than trying to paint my signature. And let me just put a few strokes in the hair, and I think I'm done. Because I think it looks like this kid. I think the mom will be happy. And I can soften up his hair a little bit there. I just think that he has the shadow is blending with the hair there, and it's making a little bit of a confusing mess. So I'm just going to simplify it a little and blur it down a little bit. Just like that. Yeah, that's a little bit nicer. And I want to soften up this color red in his forehead a little. It's just little things as you kind of stand back and look, think it's done, and sometimes I'll think a painting's done and I'll go back in and I'll work on it for another 3 or 4 hours, just making tiny little changes. Okay, remember I said following the shape of the forehead here to help emphasize the shape of the forehead. I can leave that alone. Okay, and I'm going to cut into his cheek a little bit more with the background. I can get the right color on the brush. Okay, where's the black when I need it? Okay, don't want to go too dark here, but I need to go dark enough. That's a little bit better. And let's make slim down his nostril just a tad. So this right now I'm doing just for likeness sake, because really as a painting it really doesn't need to go much further. But I do want to make sure I'm getting the likeness, which I'm sure that it's probably good enough at this point. Okay, really close now. Well, now I'm just getting silly by wrecking things that were perfectly fine. Okay, there's just a tiny spot of light here, which is the far corner of his eye. I'm going to get a little bit of the underside of his tongue here. Okay. Don't get too crazy with this, but there we go. And then he has just a little bit of a little bit of a glisten to it on his tongue. If I can get that highlight the right amount. There we go. And just a little bit of reflection off his teeth. Okay, that's pretty good. Well, I'm going to stop here, and then I'm going to take a look at it, a little bit of a look at it later on. Let's get that there. Okay, so I'm going to see how well it holds up after I've stopped painting on it. And so um, that's um, that's it for tonight, and thank you all for tuning in. Sorry about the late start there for people who were waiting at 9 o'clock. Um, this came together pretty quickly. It's worth a rewatch for those who came in late, and so you're welcome to rewatch it. After I shut down the video, I would really appreciate it if you then give a comment, or I think there's probably a comment spot that's different than the discussion feed. I'm not actually sure, but once I close the video, please leave a comment so that there's a lasting comment there. And please subscribe and click on the notice button to get future live demos. Usually they're on Tuesday nights. I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to do one on Christmas Day and New Year's Day yet, but I'll keep you guys posted. And thank you all for watching, and have a good night.